Hey everybody, this is Josh Runquist here for Heavy Debriefings, and this is episode 1 of a 33 or 34 part series that goes over the anthology of my life in music form. And by that I mean, I'm going to be doing a yearly chronicle of my top 10 favorite albums of every year I've been alive. I was born on August 19th, 1988, and coming up this year in 2023, I'll be turning the glorious age of 35. 5 more years and I'm technically middle-aged. Wow. Anyways, this is something I've wanted to do for quite a while, and why not do it this way? I think it'd be really fun, where I chronicle everything from 1988 to at least 2021, if not 2022. Once we get to that around August, which is when I want all of this completed, I'll look back at my top 10 of 2022, see if anything's changed, and go from there. But until then, let's start from the beginning, all the way back in 1988. Now, how am I doing this? Just look at the description below where I'll have the rules to all this so I don't have to explain it in every friggin' video. If that's cool with you, it's cool with me. Now, let's begin with number 10. And at number 10, it is the band Corner with Punishment for Decadence. Corner is such a great band that combines so many great different things that I still love to this day. You got your thrash influence, obviously, but you also got some death influence, you got some black metal influence, you got a little bit of prog in there every once in a while as well, and just an overall structure that I feel really makes the band so strong. While I think there's something to be said about the first and debut album, R.I.P. or Rest in Peace, depending on how you look at it, that came out the year before I was born, so I can't really include that. And that might be my favorite Corner album. But Punishment for Decadence easily is number 2. And I think between all of the Corner albums that were released all the way up to the mid-90s, there is nothing to complain about. It is such a great band, and you really can't go wrong checking out any of these albums. But for Punishment for Decadence, I just feel like they really started to grasp the kind of band that they wanted to be on this album. It's not the most raw, it's not the most perfected, but it is a Corner album through and through. It's not one that I see enough people talking about, and, that's kind of funny because, like Mass Jackal is a huge song of theirs, and, the rest of the album doesn't really seem to get as much attention, which is a shame. But for those who know, you know? But seriously, if you haven't checked out Punishment for Decadence, or if you've never checked out Corner, easily a high recommendation for me, and a band that you should check out if you want something that is based in thrash, but can combine so many different things from the death, black, and prog metal worlds. You'll enjoy it. At number 9, I have one of the most underrated bands of all time with Crimson Glory, and their second album, Transcendence. Oh, what a band Crimson Glory was, and it's such a shame that they don't get the love and appreciation that they truly deserve. Crimson Glory easily made their mark with their first debut album, and there's something about Transcendence, which is the second album, that I really feel almost beats the debut album, almost. And I guess the way I would say that is everything from their debut album, I think is more refined on Transcendence. The songs feel just a bit more tighter, the production feels a little bit more pure. Everything about the band just starts to feel a little bit more right on Transcendence, and even though the big songs are on the first album, I think there's something to be said about Transcendence. I mean, you got something like Mask of the Red Death, which is such a great song, and it is one of their best known songs for a good reason. The album artwork is just incredible to look at every single time. And of course, you can't forget what an incredible voice that Midnight really laid down through his whole run with Crimson Glory. Yeah, this is just like Corner in the fact that everything just feels a bit more refined on this album, and if you like your progressive power metal, some great falsetto vocals that if you love something like King Diamond or Queensryche, you will find something to truly love about Crimson Glory. And you can't go wrong between the first 2 albums, but of course, since we're talking about 1988, I can't say enough good things about Transcendence. And speaking of power metal, coming up next at number 8 is Helloween with Keeper of the Seven Keys, Part 2. Now, this might be a hot take, Is that what the kids still say? I mean, is there a new way to say it? I've never been in the loop even when I was a kid. But a little bit of a spicy opinion here. There's only 3 Halloween albums I like from start to finish. Keeper of the Seven Keys 1, Keeper of the Seven Keys 2, and their brand new self-titled album, which is now a couple years old. Other ones have some good songs, even some great songs, but never all the way through. And right in the middle of all of that, you have Keeper of the Seven Keys 1 and 2, of course, the first 2 albums, and once you know it, the second album from Halloween. But it's funny how that goes because I Want Out is the biggest song that Halloween has ever put out. And it's a perfect song, whether you feel like it's a libertarian anthem, you just want to escape where you live, you just want to be able to live the life you want to live, or you just feel like you're trapped. There's so many different ways you can look at it. I look at it all those, except for the libertarian one, and I think there's so much to love about this album and concept and everything that goes into it. And I recently found out that there is a comic book series based on Keeper of the Seven Keys that I really need to look at. The price is $6.66. I see what you did there. But yeah, seriously, Halloween is a great power metal band, and if you're outside of America, they are one of the biggest power metal bands in the world. And as long as my foot is up to the task, I will be able to see them with Hammerfall coming up in May. And I'm so excited because I have yet to see either band, and I'm excited to see both. And yeah, as cliched as it is, you know, it's like I Want Out is their Enter Sandman. It's their Ace of Spades. It's their Number of the Beast. But I've yet to see it, and I can't wait to sing along. And if you like great European power metal, one of the most standout legendary power metal bands of all time is Halloween. And I highly recommend, without question, all 3 albums that I talked about. Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1 and 2, and of course, their self-titled album. But since we're talking about Part 2 here, that might be the one to start with if you just care about songs alone and not the concept. And the reason I say that is because of their standout song, I Want Out. Now, coming in at number 7, we're going a bit of a different direction here with some crossover thrash. From what might be my favorite crossover thrash band, the more I think about it, the more that I think it is true. I mean, there's some other bands that might rival it, but at least the way I'm feeling it right now, I gotta hand it to these guys. It's DRI with Four of a Kind. Yes, before their seminal album Thrash Zone, which, spoiler, that's going to be talked about pretty soon. But before Four of a Kind, the band really started to get their name out there and start to develop who they are. But with Four of a Kind, they really established what they are with this crossover thrash sound. And of course, one of their biggest songs, and one that they actually did a video for with Suit and Tie Guy, is just a fantastic song. And it's a great representation of what crossover thrash sounded like, especially in the 80s. This is a seminal album along with Thrash Zone, and I can't sing the praises of these 2 albums enough, and I can't wait to talk about Thrash Zone later. But with Four of a Kind, it's a little dirtier, it's a little grittier, the production's a little bit lower, so you gotta turn it up a little bit more if you want to enjoy it, but the songs are just so good. And it's a fun album to listen to from start to finish. And yeah, it's just one of those albums that no matter what they're talking about, whether you're stuck in a corporate job, whether you're stuck in life, whether you just want to party. And of course, some more themes that you'll hit on more in Thrash Zone. DRI has everything that you're looking for. And between Thrash Zone and Four of a Kind, you really can't go wrong if you want to go check them out. So yes, by all means, if you want to start off here, you're not wrong for doing so. Check out Four of a Kind. Coming in at number 6, the most evil album on the list. It is, of course, King Diamond's Them. And wouldn't you know it, another second album. There was a lot of second albums on this list, I'm realizing, and for good reason. A lot of my favorite bands started off just a little bit before this, and they really started to craft their sound the year I was born. I think that's pretty cool. But with King Diamond, of course, conceptually, every album is a horror story. Sometimes they're connected, sometimes they're not, and this one, of course, has the great legendary song Welcome Home, which, if you know of Clerks 2, you've heard this song. If you've ever heard of King Diamond, most likely, this is the song that you know. King Diamond just does it right on this album and truly establishes what he wants to accomplish outside of Merciful Fate. Now, there's nothing wrong with the debut album, but with them, it just nailed it perfectly. And there's a reason that Them is still a legendary album to this day. It's not Abigail, but it is a fantastic, fantastic album. Now, I know King Diamond's vocals are not for everyone, much like what I'm talking about here with Crimson Glory previously. The falsettos are very cringe to some people, very cool to others. To me, it's very cool. And I can understand why some people would not enjoy those type of vocals. So if you're not into it, you're probably not going to appreciate King Diamond as much as you could. But I also wager that if you give it a chance, this could be what turns you around on falsettos. So between something like Crimson Glory and King Diamond and another album I'm going to be talking about soon, I think this style of metal could be something that you really enjoy if you just give it a chance. So if you want your metal full of that traditional metal sound, that traditional European sound, and full of some great fun cheesy horror, you can't do much better than King Diamond. And you can't do much better than the album Them. Coming in at number 5, we got some more thrash going on here with my favorite thrash band of all time, Testament, and the album The New Order. And boy howdy, another sophomore album. Who would have thunk it? But yes, Testament really started to find their craft with their sophomore album. Not any diss at all on their debut album, but The New Order is just phenomenal. And I love the fact that it came out the year I was born. With Disciples of the Watch being such a great seminal song and a song that's always in the setlist to this day. And of course, you have one of my favorite songs, Into the Pit. You have The Preacher. You have so many great songs off of this album, and it's so cohesive from start to finish. The band really started to establish who they are on this album. I know a lot of people say that Testament does rip off Metallica, and I don't hear it. I've never heard it in any song. I don't think Chuck Billy sounds like James Hetfield. I don't think the guitars sound anything like Kirk or James or Dave Mustaine ever accomplished. I don't hear any of it. Testament sounds like Testament to me. And no, they are not the Christian rock band that played in Reverend Lovejoy's church in the basement on The Simpsons. This is, of course, the Bay Area thrash that really should have been a part of the top 4. The big 4, my apologies. And if someone needs to replace Slayer on the big 4 shows, I mean, you could either do Kerry King's new band, who I'm sure will be playing some Slayer covers, or you can bring up one of the B Squad, at least in popularity, of the big 4, and I would say it should be Testament. And you really can't go wrong with The New Order if you want that 80s thrash done to an absolute T. Fantastic band, fantastic album. It can't get much better when it comes to thrash. Following that, at number 4 is Queensryche with their most seminal album, Operation Mindcrime. Yes, another concept album, another band that has some falsettos, and of course, progressive metal. Yes, between Operation Mindcrime and Empire, that is perfect Queensryche. There's a reason for that. Like, they hit their perfect stride between these two albums. You can say even earlier, and you're not wrong. You can say later, and you start to be wrong. Until the later albums, especially the brand new album from Queensryche, Digital Noise Alliance, which I think is the best thing since Empire. But Operation Mindcrime is a legendary album for a good reason. I mean, whether you're talking about the title track, I Don't Believe in Love, Eyes of a Stranger, what a perfect closing song for Operation Mindcrime. Yeah, just everything about this album, just a great concept. I love the story. As convoluted as it can get, I think it fits together so well. Album cover is so legendary as well. Jeff Tate is just soaring on this album. The whole band is just completely A-game when it comes to this, and this lineup is just perfect. And I love everything that they accomplished with this album. And again, it's just another one that I'm so happy it came out my birth year. And if you've never checked out Queensryche before, much like I talked about with King Diamond, much like I talked about with Crimson Glory, The vocals may not be your thing if you like the heavier side of things or if you don't like some falsettos, but again, give it a chance. There's a reason why Queensryche was on top of the world for a while. They wrote some phenomenal songs, and they deserve every bit of credit that they still get for Operation Mindcrime. Coming in at number 3 is one of the most underrated bands of all time with Sanctuary and Refuge Denied. Sanctuary is the type of band that, again, I can't say it enough when it comes to falsettos. There's a lot of that on this particular list, and a lot of that came out in '88. It was a big year for falsettos, as you can see, especially when I look back at the music that came out the year I was born, and how much I gravitate towards it. But when you think about power metal, when you think about thrash metal, when you think about progressive metal, when you think about mixing subgenres, when you think about some of the best vocals ever laid down by the legendary Warl Dane, Refuge Denied is that album that didn't start at all, but it was a game changer. Sanctuary is one of those bands that sadly did not release enough music, and between all of their albums, which is so few, I love everything that they've ever done, and I love the fact that I was able to see them twice in my lifetime. And that second time was the only time that I even got to interview Mr. Warl Dane, and I will always take that to heart. I only had about 15 minutes with him. I wish I could have had more, and especially if I'd known that was going to be the only time I would be able to talk to him. There were so many more questions I would have loved to have asked him, especially about Sanctuary's early albums. Of course, we were talking about the year the sun died, but of course I would have loved to have known about the previous material as well. But yes, if you want to know where it all began, '88 is a good year for the falsetto. But if you like power, thrash, prog, a little bit, almost black metal at times, if you like all of that with some soaring falsettos, and of course, if you want to know where Warl Dane got his start, that you most know him for, I could not recommend Sanctuary more, and especially their album Refuge Denied. Number 2 might be my favorite band of all time. They're inching closer every single year to becoming my favorite band, and for good reason. Because even though they have some albums that I just don't care about too much, they have enough albums that I do care about, and songs off every single album that means so much to me. It is, of course, the band King's X, with their debut album, Out of the Silent Planet. Now, again, this is another example of a band who started off one way and was able to change their sound in so many different ways. Some albums get heavier, some of them get poppier, some of them have more of a classic rock sound to them, and they're all the correct course for the band. But on this album, they were really figuring out who they were, despite the fact that they were together for a good part of the '80s under a different pseudonym. King's X is where the band really found what they wanted to be. And with Out of the Silent Planet, they were still working on it, but I'm so glad that they stuck with it and became one of the most underrated bands of all time, underappreciated bands of all time, and just one of my favorite bands of all time. Ty, Jerry, and Doug are possibly the greatest trio to exist, and I know there's Rush, who mean a lot to me, but there's just something about King's X, man. There's just something about King's X. And whether you got like the title track, whether you got Goldilocks, whether you got Over My Head, I mean, there's so many great songs off this album. And the production might sound a little dated if you're not into the '80s production. To me, it feels like the perfect production for the perfect time. And I love everything that's come off of this album. And every time that I've gotten to see them, which is only twice at this point, I hope to at least make it one more time before they call it a day. King's X has always done music off this album, and I'm glad that they still do. Of course, Doug doesn't sing Goldilocks anymore. He points the mic at us, towards the audience, and we sing along. I have no problem with that. It's a beautiful song whether he sings it or we sing it. But Out of the Silent Planet is where it all began for the name of King's X, and they have put out so many great albums. And I'm glad that even up to last year, they're still making great music. And I hope that they continue on for as long as they possibly can. But if you want a good starting point for King's X that's not too heavy, not too proggy, not too poppy, I highly recommend Out of the Silent Planet. And my number one album of 1988. To anyone who truly knows me, this should not be a shock whatsoever. And to those of you that have stuck around and don't know anything about me, you're gonna be quite upset that I did not choose And Justice for All by Metallica. Womp womp. No, I said that this is my top 10. Not the biggest albums of each year. Not the overall consensus of the best albums of the year. Just my humblest of humble opinions from this very homely and very unkempt man. I choose for number one, for my favorite album of 1988 to be Leprosy by Death. This is, to me, not just the sophomore album, which of course, I mean, again, this is the year of sophomore albums and the year of falsettos. But to me, Death's Leprosy is the greatest death metal album ever made. I'm talking straight up death metal, not talking about tech death, not talking about progressive death, not talking about blackened death, not talking about any of the other subgenres. I'm talking about straight ahead, old school death metal. You don't get better than Leprosy. One of the most legendary album covers of all time. I mean, especially back in '88, who would dare put Pink on a death metal album cover? Well, Chuck and company did. Who wrote such great songs like Open Casket, Leprosy, Pull the Plug? Chuck and company did. And while Scream Bloody Gore is arguably the first death metal album along with Possess, Seven Churches, I'll let you decide which one of those is the true death metal album to start it all. I still say both of those are great albums, but they're not the best. And any album that has come out since Leprosy can either be good or great or fantastic or mind-blowing, phenomenal, any of the adjectives or descriptors that you would like to put on a death metal album. But none of them top the proficiency, the musicianship, the rawness, the prowess, the intensity, the anger, the beast that is Leprosy. Now, if you disagree with me, I totally understand. And if you disagree with me on any of the choices that I have here for my own personal top 10, feel free to tell me why I'm wrong about my own list in the comments below. Like or dislike, subscribe to the channel if it tickles your fancy, or if you want to check out any of the 860 plus interviews that I've done so far. Well, that might be a little less since some of them are on thatdrummerguy.com in written form, but I also got other stuff going on. Check out Backwards Marathon, where I do my album retrospectives in tier-ranked form, and so many other things that I got going on in the near future. Of course, all of it under Heavy Debriefings. But until next time, when we talk about the magical year that is 1989, and the last year that we talk about the 80s, because, well, I was born in 88, so obviously, succinctly, we go into 89. For Heavy Debriefings, this is Josh Runquist saying, see ya.